I recently came across a statistic that Bloomberg stated South Africa is the second most stressed out nation in the world. Now, that's quite frightening. The real frightening part in all of this is, according to their statistic, we scored 70.0 on their scale. The country that scored number one was Nigeria at 70.1, only 0.1% more than the South African statistic. The third country was Sierra Leone that scored in the lower 50s, almost 15 to 17 base points difference than South Africa. So frequently people talk about the level of burnout, the level of anxiety, depressions, and all these issues that we are facing within the country. And a lot of leaders and a lot of managers makes it off that said, oh man, just grow up, just deal with the reality. But unfortunately, from a statistical point of view, we know that this is not always as simple as we make it out to be. Our companies are struggling. Our people are constantly challenged with focus on life issues, infrastructure issues, corruption, political issues throughout the nation. And really the question that comes to us as a church and as people of God is, how do we deal with an environment that obviously are presenting numerous challenges for us? I believe one of the answers lies in the fact that we need to invest in what we call personal resilience. A lot of time people would ask, Marcel, what exactly is resilience? And I want to use an image that I picked up through the years within the field of sports training. So some time ago I had the opportunity of training at the University of Stellenbosch. It was a group of young leaders and we were training on this topic of personal resilience when one of the guys told me, he was one of our national 10,000 meters or 10 kilometers athletes, quite famous in the mid-90s. And he said, Marcel, the topic of resilience was very important coming to the athletics arena. For us, it wasn't so much a problem of undertraining, getting the right amount of training in. Our problem was rather getting not too much training in. You see, you can push your body to the limit. The problem is if you take that one step further, that's where injury happens. So for them preparing for a 10,000 meter run, or we can take a big Comrades or another marathon example, it is the overtraining that's sometimes the problem, and that's where injury happens. When we think about our own resilience, and I want you to keep that image of the athlete in mind that overtrains, exactly the same thing happens to us, but not on a physical level. It happens much more often on an emotional level. We have all these various balls that we're trying to juggle every day. We have our personal lives, we have our marriages with our partners, we have our children, we have our economic environments, we have our social environments, we have our work and all the different stressors that's connected with that. And every one of these elements is taking up just a little bit more energy and a little bit more emotional capacity till we get to a place where we are literally emotionally just depleted. And then we get that one more shock on the system, or that one more traumatic event, or that one more client, or that one more incident that does push us over the limit. And emotionally we pick up scarring. My challenge today really comes from the narrative of Joshua. Joshua was trained under the righteous hand of Moses, being guided out of Egypt, seeing all the miracles of God, going into this season within the desert for 40 years. And then finally Moses passes along, and Joshua steps into the leadership position. And Joshua moves into the promised land with a relatively young generation. We understand from the Bible that his entire generation died out in the desert. And only now does the conquest of the promised land, Israel, starts. Unfortunately, Joshua was never successful in accomplishing God's word for that generation and that season. We know that the time of the judges started after Joshua died out, and then finally Israel selected a king. First king was Saul, second king was David, and only in the time of David, now this is about 200 years after Joshua, did the entire land that God promised to the Israelites only become a reality for them. We sometimes struggle from the Old Testament perspective to understand what exactly happened and why didn't Joshua and his men took charge of the entire land. It's only in the book of Hebrews chapter 3 and 4 that we read about God's rest. And the author of the book says that Israel didn't take possession of the land because they didn't enter into the promise of God's rest. I want to connect this concept back to your personal resilience. One of the elements that we so frequently run into, or the challenge, is the fact that God has spoken promises over our lives, over our country. Just recently, we had a time together here in the Pretoria district where Uncle Angus called a time of prayer for the whole nation to come together, a time to intercede for our nation, trusting God that we will enter into a rest, into a state where we trust God that He is able to do what He has promised. I want to challenge you today concerning your own personal resilience. Are you in a state of rest? Are you in a state where you constantly trust and believe God that the promises that He has spoken over your life, that you can truly believe that? Or are you constantly gravitating towards every stressor and every anxiety and every just thing that's happening around you, driving you like the Israelites to try and just conquer small little bits and pieces? Or can you go into the state of rest that the book of Hebrews are talking about, where I say, God, I can promise, I can take you at your promises. I can trust you for what you have spoken over my life. I don't want to get to a place where I get emotionally depleted to such an extent that one more little push, one more little event is going to push me over the brink and I'm going to get injured by that. May you meditate on this word. May God really just illuminate this thought on your resilience and going forward for your own personal life, but also the team and the people that you might be influencing.